It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wilman.
Let me tell you the story of two men by the name of John Anybody and Jim Somebody. Now, John Anybody lived to a ripe old age and died. He went to heaven and applied as a candidate for residency in that place. St. Peter was questioning John Anybody about himself. In the course of the conversation, Mr. Anybody asked St. Peter what kind of people lived in heaven. "Well, what kind of people lived in the town where you lived on earth?" St. Peter asked Mr. Anybody, turning the question back to him. "Oh, the town I lived in wasn't a good town to live in at all. The people weren't friendly. They were stingy. They weren't good neighbors. I just didn't like living in that town at all. That's the reason I ask you what kind of people live up here. If it is the same kind of people, I would just as soon go to the other place," Mr. Anybody replied. "Well, I hate to tell you this," said St. Peter, "but the same kind of people live up here as lived in your town on earth." "If that's the case," replied Mr. Anybody, "you can count me out. I want no part of a place like the place I lived in on earth." And with that, Mr. Anybody turned and walked away. As he was leaving, he happened to meet Mr. Jim Somebody, who was on his way to talk to St. Peter about living in heaven. "Not any need of going in there," Mr. Anybody told Mr. Somebody. "People in there are just like they were on earth. They aren't worth living with." Mr. Somebody thanked him for the advice, but stated that he wanted to check it out for himself. When Mr. Somebody got to the gate, he began talking with St. Peter. "What kind of people live up here?" Mr. Somebody asked St. Peter. "The fellow I passed on the road said they weren't fit to live with." Again, St. Peter did not answer his question directly, but with another question. "What kind of people lived in the town where you lived on earth?" St. Peter asked Mr. Somebody. "Oh, they were fine people. They were friendly. They were generous and helpful. Real good neighbors. I really enjoyed living in the town where I lived on earth," Mr. Somebody said in reply to St. Peter's question. "Well," said St. Peter, "the same kind of people live up here." "Excellent," claimed Mr. Somebody. "How about opening the gates and letting me in?" And St. Peter did open the gates, and Mr. Somebody promptly entered heaven. Well, that's the story of Mr. John Anybody and Mr. Jim Somebody. Both of them asked St. Peter the same question, and St. Peter asked both of them the same question. But St. Peter received two completely different answers from the two men. Mr. Somebody went to heaven, and Mr. Anybody went to, well, Mr. Anybody just didn't go to heaven, but it was of his own free choice that he did not go to heaven. I nearly forgot to tell you, Mr. Anybody and Mr. Somebody lived in the same town, anywhere, earth.
This has been My Turn with Don Wilman, a production of the American Family Association.